I'm Melissa Joles with Impact Collision Solutions, and Craig Chafee, the Training Manager for Norton St. Gobain, is your presenter for this webinar. The presentation will take approximately 45 minutes, and we are recording it, and we'll post it on the website under Training Videos. If you have any questions, you can type them in the chat box at the bottom right of your screen, and we will also follow up by sending everyone on the call a copy of the presentation with Craig's contact information, as well as some other attachments that Craig will go over before he begins. And now I'll turn it over to Craig. Craig, sorry about that.
Thanks, Melissa. Welcome, everybody. Once again, my name is Craig Chafee, Training Manager for Norton St. Gobain. We've been part of the ICAR Training Alliance since 2008, and we're an ASC training provider, and of course glad to be hosted by our friends at Impact. Today we're going to do one of our 13 ICAR classes that are available through the Industry Training Alliance. And as Melissa mentioned, the body panel refinishing is the subject for today. For those folks that are interested, you can get credit for a 1 hour ICAR credit. Melissa will send you the tests, and I will also go over the application at the end on how you get credit for your points. There's no fee for our training, but of course the folks at ICAR want their money for like transaction or fees or things like that, but we'll go over that at the end. So the agenda for today, we're going to talk about DA, dual action orbital sanding. We're going to talk about some body filler techniques. We're going to talk about some cutoff wheel applications, and we're also going to talk about some scuffing techniques, especially as they relate to body panels. And of course, I'll show you the tests that Melissa will be sending to you and make sure we cover all the items that will be on the tests throughout the presentation. And like I said, if you're interested, Melissa will send you my contact information. You can send the test to me either electronically or through the mail, and I'll be sure to process it for ICAR to get your credits, and I'll show you how you can get your credits with the application. So let's dive in. DA, as you probably know, stands for dual action. It can be random or it could be orbital. They come in a variety of sizes in the automotive aftermarket or in the collision industry. 6-inch seems to be very popular. You might see some 5-inch, you might see some 3-inch, but this is going to be a generalization on DAs because it's the most versatile tool in the body shop and the most widely used tool when it comes to body panel refinishing. There's a couple different types of DAs out there. There's what they know as a body man's DA, which is the 3/16 orbit that you see on this illustration. And then, of course, what the industry calls a painter's DA, which is the 3/32. Being an abrasive sandpaper company, we kind of draw the line in between the two, right about 320 grits. 3/16 orbit is typically 320 grit, and coarser, anywhere down to 40, 36, which most body men do for refinishing panels. And then, of course, most of our friends on the paint side, they use a 3/32 tool. These tools can be labeled with different handles, different colors, but in the abrasives world, we separate them by grit. Pretty much everything past 320, you start to get into primer work, base coat, clear coat. That should be on a 3/32 type tool, and most of the major manufacturers of the tools have these type of cams. There are some 3/8 out there. There are some 5/16, which is kind of in between the two, but these seem to be 90% of the market and the norm. So the reason that it's we're illustrating orbital action versus random orbital is the orbital action kind of goes in a rotary direction, and then of course the actual random is the cam action that you see. So the 3/16 and the 3/32 is what is the actual cam action, or the throw, as some people say, of the DA. So we just want to make sure we know the difference, because believe it or not, using the wrong throw action or wrong orbital sander, DA, can affect some of your refinishing and your paint work or your body work. So for example, if you took a 1,000 grit disc and put it on a 3/16 tool, your scratch could be a lot more aggressive than what you want it to be than versus using the right tool as a 3/32. There's a couple different types of sanding discs that are out there. There are what we like to call pressure-sensitive adhesive. Some people call it stick it. Some people call it stick and sand. You'll see all the different abbreviations and spellings here. Also, there are Velcro products out there. Velcro is copyrighted by Velcro USA. So in the Norton world, we use Norgrip, but some people use Hook and Loop. Some people use Hook It. But believe it or not, there's a difference in how the actual sandpaper is attached to the DA can affect the performance in the collision industry. Believe it or not, we've actually documented the difference between a stick-it disc or a PSA pressure-sensitive adhesive disc and a Velcro disc is about 30% in performance. There's two things that break down abrasives, is heat and pressure, and believe it or not, Velcro, or what we call Norgrip, actually helps with both the heat and the pressure. Plus, you can reuse a Velcro disc or a Norgrip disc or a hook and loop disc, whatever you want to call it. You can reuse that when a stick-it disc or a PSA pressure-sensitive adhesive disc falls on the shop floor glued down. It's pretty much done. It won't stick back on the DA again. Where if you use the Velcro disc, if it fell on the ground, it can be wiped off and reused. So believe it or not, we've done some sand-offs with stick-it disc versus Velcro disc, and you actually get a larger area opened or sanded in the same amount of time with the benefit of the Velcro disc to the tune of 30%. So you might want to keep that in mind. That's something that's on the test. Also, the abrasive grain can definitely affect what's being sanded or what you're trying to sand. For example, the yellow disc in the corner there, or gold-colored disc, that's an aluminum oxide. That's probably the most versatile abrasive grain that is used in the sanding world. Just about ourselves and all of our competitors have that product. It's pretty common. It can go anywhere from 24 grit all the way up to 1500, so that's why it's very versatile. To the left of it, the blue disc that's there with the holes in it, that's a zirconia disc. That's a patented product that made Norton famous 130 years ago. That's a rough sanding type product that's really good on body filler. It only comes from 36 to 80 grit. And then the lower right-hand corner, that's a ceramic disc, and that seems to be the buzz in the marketplace. Ourselves and our competitors are refining our grains. The neat thing about a ceramic disc or a ceramic grain is it's very good under heat and pressure. It also, with the buzz in the marketplace with aluminum and some of these high-strength steels, it's actually very good on aluminum and stainless steel, where aluminum oxide, the yellow-colored disc, and the other darker-colored blue disc might wear down over time, especially on something like stainless steel, where the ceramic disc definitely stands up to the test of time and does very well against heat and pressure. So the aluminum oxide is kind of where the market started. Like I said, we have a patented grain in zirconia, which is still really good on body filler. But ceramic, like the disc down in the corner, is definitely the way the market seems to be going. You get more bang for your buck, and it's better under heat and pressure. Also, you saw multi-air. Vacuum sanding is becoming very, very popular these days, especially with the waterboard movement. Majority of Europe, all of Canada are waterborne, and of course controlling your dust, and because of the way they dry waterborne paints, it's all about air movement. We don't want get any trash or dirt or nibs in our paint jobs, so more and more shops are installing vacuum units, either remote or central, or even using self-generated vacuums. But the multi-air product that we happen to carry is actually 35% more efficient than a disc with 6 holes in it, and that's testing that we've done with our own paper versus our own multi-air product. So vacuum sanding, the disc doesn't clog as much. The vacuum system extracts everything that's already been sanded, so you're not redoing or reworking anything, and it gives you a cleaner shop, better for your employees, better for the environment, and of course if you're spraying waterborne paint, it's going to help your drying process without getting any dust moving around. And of course, even with the aluminum movement that's going on with the F-150 big buzz coming out in October, wet vacuum systems are becoming almost required if you want to do aluminum work in the future, but that's a whole nother subject. So it's just some numbers for you to remember if you decide to take the test. The difference between a pressure-sensitive adhesive and a Velcro disc is 30%, and the multi-air product that's out there, vacuum sanding disc, is 35% more efficient than a disc with just only 6 holes in it. And you're looking at probably 50 to 60% more efficiency using a Velcro disc than not using any vacuum holes at all, just so you know. Obviously, the tool speed has a big determination on how well the sandpaper is going to sand. Most DAs out there are rated for 10 to 12,000 RPMs. There are some 15,000 RPM 3/8 drive tools. They're mostly for the industrial market, but we have seen them work their way into the collision industry. Just a word of caution there. Obviously, the faster the tool goes and the harder it goes, the more scratches are going to be put into your body panels that you might have to either turn the tool speed down or somehow try to eliminate those scratches, especially if they come through in your body filler, your primer, or even your base coat work. Air hoses obviously play a big part in spray guns, and believe it or not, they play a big part in DAs and tools that are used in the collision industry, especially in body panel refinishing. The norm out there is 85 to 90 psi coming off the wall to the tool, or if you're rating things in cubic feet per minute, you're looking at 12 to 18 cubic feet per minute. And it's very important because if you have too much pressure going to the tool could wear out or sand too aggressively, or if you don't have enough pressure, then it's going to obviously dramatically affect your productivity. The air hose length itself also can hinder. Believe it or not, as the hose length doubles, the air pressure from the wall, the air pressure drop, I should say, doubles. So for example, if I have a metal hose in my body shop and it's routed right to the drop, and then I have this very long rubber hose going to wherever my work area is in the shop, I can have a dramatic effect on the pressure drop from the wall to the tool, which is obviously going to affect your performance. As you also see on the graphic here, air pressure drops twice as much with a rubber hose than it does with a metal pipe. So that's where a lot of the compressed air suppliers out there or plumbers, they plumb everything with a metal pipe on the wall to keep as much pressure coming from your compressor to the drop. And then, of course, we need the flexibility of rubber hoses to get around vehicles and workstations and other things in our body shops that then it's rubber. But believe it or not, the rubber hose can dramatically affect the pressure drop that comes from the wall. Matter of fact, here's another chart showing you even the ID, the inner diameter of the hose, can dramatically affect the pressure that's coming to the tool. For example, a 1/4 inch ID, internal diameter, on a 25-foot hose, believe it or not, from the wall to the tool, can have up to a 25 psi drop. And look at 50 feet, can have up to 50 psi drop. So 5/16 is very popular. That's some of the high flow that a lot of the spray gun manufacturers are recommending. And believe it or not, quite a few of the tool manufacturers, for example, Dynabrade, who we carry, also recommends a 5/16 because your drop is very minimal. Obviously, if you can get as big as 3/8, that's even better, because as you see here in the graphic, in a 25-foot hose with a 3/8 ID diameter of the hose, you're only going to get 3 psi drop. So you're going to get as much air pressure as possible from the wall to the tool, which the tool's going to run most efficiently. You're going to get your jobs done a whole lot faster. And then, of course, a 50-foot hose would only have a 6 psi drop. So the bigger the ID of the hose, the less pressure drop you're going to have from the wall to the tool. And, of course, the shorter the length of the hose, which we'll recap that in just a second. The coupler, believe it or not, can play a dramatic effect on how much air pressure gets from your compressor through your metal pipes to your hoses. The automotive or true flake that you see on the left, obviously very popular. The aero and the industrial ones do work their way into our market. They're kind of old school, but as you'll see in a minute, their IDs are around 1/4 of an inch diameter, inner diameter, and it, as you saw in the previous graphics, it dramatically affects the pressure drop that's coming from the airline. So maximum flow types, as you see on the right, the far right, is what all the spray gun manufacturers are recommending, and it's what most of the tool manufacturers are also recommending. They want you to get as much air to that tool so it could run as efficiently as possible. Believe it or not, the tool can have a dramatic effect on the sandpaper or the grinding wheel or whatever you're running on that particular tool, which we'll get into a little bit more. So the one on the left is probably the most popular in our market, but the market is going to the max flow type. And if you're using a couple of the ones in the middle, as you saw in the previous chart, you're getting probably some significant drops coming from the wall to whatever length of hose by the time you get it going to the tool. Matter of fact, here's an illustrated picture showing you a 1/4 inch diameter versus a 5/16 or a max flow. It's 35% larger, so you're going to get more air coming to the tool, and as you saw in the previous graphics, you're going to get a whole lot less air drop. Perfect air hose. We don't sell any air hoses. We know a lot of distributors, and our friends at Impact can help you with that. Do so, but the perfect hose is 20 feet or less in length, because you saw the drop that happens over a 25-foot hose. There are some swivel connectors out there that'll stop hoses from binding or pinching. Obviously a max flow coupler, as you saw, with 35% ID is ideal, and the ID of the actual hose being 3/8. You're going to get that less than 3 psi drop. So in the perfect world, the perfect hose would have all these characteristics to make sure we're getting as much air from our air compressor to the tools that are in our shop. If it's a good-sized shop and you have multiple drops, obviously the more drops and different types of hoses that you can have can dramatically affect your performance. It doesn't hurt to check the gauge pressure. I know a lot of spray guns have built-in digital gauges, and some that don't. Their manufacturers are recommending putting an air gauge on the line or to the tool. It's not a bad practice also. We even recommend it in our best practices to check the air pressure coming from the end of the hose to the tool, because it's dramatically going to affect the performance of the tool. Okay, so a simple air gauge can be put together. I know there's some out there that are available, but it doesn't hurt to do this on a weekly basis, just to make sure that you're getting the air pressure to the tools that you want or that the manufacturer is recommending, so you get the best performance out of the tool, plus you can be as efficiently as possible when you're refinishing panels. Cleaning the muffler is always a great idea, whether it's a vacuum tool or not. One of the stories I like to tell, and I'm not picking on our friends in Canada, but I was up in the Ottawa area and somebody was using one of our multi-air sanders. And when they found out that I was the training manager for North America, they said, you know, this tool doesn't work as good as it did when I first got it. And I asked a simple question, well, do you ever clean it? And the technician said, no, didn't think I had to. So I took the tool apart, blew it out with compressed air, put it back together, and gave it to him. And he started sanding with it. Geez, this is like new. And I said, well, do you really think your company wants to, I'm located in Boston, Massachusetts. I think you think your company wants to fly me all the way out to Ottawa to clean out a tool that you can do on a regular basis and obviously keeping it running like new? And he said, no, I guess that's probably a good idea. So whether it's a vacuum tool, a non-vac tool, there's mufflers and different filters on there for a reason. It never hurts to clean out the tools. They're going to run best that way. It never hurts to clean up the backup pad in between uses. You know, a good clean shop is obviously going to give you better performing work, and a good clean tool is going to do the same thing. Believe it or not, the type of backup pad you use can dramatically affect the performance of the sandpaper, especially when it comes to refinishing body panels. The pad all the way to the left is a low profile soft density. As you can see, it's recommended for grits 320 and finer. So that would go on that 3/32, or what they call the painter's tool, ideally, because it has its own built-in interface pad. It's obviously softer and thicker to conform to contours, and it's doing most of your fine grit sanding. As I mentioned, 320 grit and up. This type of pad should be used 320, 500, 800, 1,000, 12, 15, even 3,000. Okay? The two pads, the one in the middle and the one to the right, those are considered bodyman's pads, and bodymen have their own preference. So there's a low profile, medium density. It's a standard pad, but it's recommended for medium grit sanding or coarse grit sanding where you're looking for a hard edge, and it's 320 grit and coarser. The tempered edge medium density pad all the way to the right will do the same things that the pad in the middle will do, but it's a little more flexible at the edge. It's easier to reach around small contours, but it is also recommended for a 3/16 bodyman's DA with 320 grit or coarser. Okay? And this is an actual picture right out of our catalog, but there's a number of different companies that make backup pads, but believe it or not, the type of pad you use can dramatically affect the performance. For example, if I use the low profile soft density pad with an 80 grit piece of sandpaper, obviously I wouldn't get as much of the area abraded if I used one of the two pads to the right with an 80 grit. And just the opposite, if I took one of the two pads, either the one in the middle or the one on the right with an 800 grit, I'm going to get a very dramatic different scratch depending on the backup pad that I use and depending on the throw of the DA. Obviously, I kind of touched on this before, cleaning the pad is helpful, especially if you're using stick-it or PSA type products. We've seen some people that have left stick-it disc on tools for months at a time and wonder why they had a problem over time getting it off. So it doesn't, I don't know if you have to do it overnight, but it is a good idea to clean the pad every now and then, especially if you notice that the discs aren't sticking to it, because most sandpaper manufacturers, just like us, we put the glue on there for you so it can stick, and actually it's the same glue, at least in our world, that's used to hold the Velcro on. So it doesn't hurt to clean off the pad and the tool on a regular basis, because it will dramatically affect your performance in the shop. I know I'm probably preaching to the choir here, and it's kind of funny. I did some training in Atlanta yesterday, and I was amazed a seasoned veteran in our industry was running the tool above the panel that he was about to do some defect removal and buffing, and then introduced it to the panel and wondered why he had some heavy scratches or pigtails with 1500 grit sandpaper. We want to start the tool on the actual panel and stop it off. If you're wondering what I'm talking about, we have some best practice videos actually on our website that might help you with that, but I have a feeling I'm preaching to the choir here. So we want to physically start the DA on the panel, whatever we're sanding, and obviously shut it off when we take it off the panel. We also want to use the sander as flat as possible. We're going to get the most work or most bang for our buck. We're also not going to get any gouges. I know, I mean, I even see myself sometimes there's an area I need to get into. I'll take the tool and I might raise it up in the corner, but as a general practice, the flatter we use the tool, the better the abrasive disc is going to work, and we're going to have less gouging, less scratches that we're either going to have to fill with filler or primer or whatever it may be. And then, of course, hopefully it doesn't come through in our base coat and top coat. So tilting the tool will definitely create gouges. This is a 5-inch tool showing you dramatically, and obviously with a 6-inch tool, you can do the same type of damage. So we want to keep the tool as flat as possible. It's just going to help us in our refinishing of any panels down the road. Obviously, we want to let the tool do the work. I advise some of our salespeople out in the field to listen for people singing our song, so to speak. If we hear somebody really bearing down on a DA, maybe they're not using the right abrasives, maybe they're not using the right tool, maybe they're not using the right backup pad, but obviously the tool is designed, as we mentioned, to spin anywhere from 10 to 12, maybe even 15,000 RPMs. Let the tool do the work. If we see somebody white-knuckling, as we say in the industry, and they're pushing really hard, there's probably a better way. So it's probably a more aggressive tool, a more aggressive sandpaper, a more aggressive throw action, depending on what grit they're using. So as you can see, the illustration is we're just kind of guiding the tool. They're called palm sanders for a reason. So we're just kind of guiding the tool. We don't need to be like the brick wall illustration pushing down on the tool. It's just not helping us in terms of refinishing. We don't need to press hard down on the tool, as this illustration shows. Obviously, we even touch on it in our best practices, which is a whole other subject in another ICAR class course. But the best way I can equate it is, I know it's summertime and people are mowing their lawns. It's kind of like mowing your lawn, running the sander. We want to go back and forth in one direction, and even in our best practices, we recommend you go back and forth in a 90-degree direction from where you just sanded, just to make sure you've sanded everywhere you need to sand. Make sure you have a nice uniform scratch for body filler or any primer to stick to. We want to get a good tooth there. And that way we know we've sanded everywhere we need to sand. And like I said, if you're looking for an illustration, there's a pretty good one on our website. And we actually cover it in a separate class called Best Practices. But we want to make sure we do a slow overlapping stroke. It's really not that much different than spraying with paint. There's some manufacturers recommend a 50 or 75% overlap, depending on what you're spraying, and there's really no difference with sanding. So it's kind of like mowing your lawn, or if anybody's still fertilizing, it's kind of like laying the fertilizer down. We go in one direction and we kind of overlap and make sure we've covered all the areas that we want to cover. When it comes to using cutoff wheels, obviously you'll see an illustration there that we want to make sure the guard's on there. If you're not aware of it, most 3-inch cutoff wheels, which are very common in our industry, spin at 20,000 RPMs. Believe it or not, if that wheel gets chipped, dropped, or a chunk comes out of it, we've actually equated it to like getting hit by a bullet. And it's typically not the operator. It's usually the innocent bystander, somebody walking by, or maybe the technician is working next to them. And unfortunately, I've made some calls on some folks that are either taking the guard off or they're running in overspeed situations. So we want to be careful. Most 3-inch cutoff wheels come in a couple different thicknesses, 1/32, which is very thin. That's about the thickness of a paper clip. And of course, the most popular in our industry, and about 80% of the 3-inch cutoff wheels that are used out there in cutting off panels, is a 1/16. But these spin at 20,000 RPM, so we want to make sure the guard is on there. We even advise our own salespeople and our distributors, if they come upon a situation where an operator is not using the guard, you know what? Your safety, your family safety, your friends, it's not worth the business or the aggravation. And what happens a lot too is some people take the guard off a 3-inch tool, and then that gives them the ability to put a 4-inch tool on there, or a 4-inch cutoff wheel, I should say. Well, believe it or not, a 4-inch cutoff wheel is not rated for 20,000 RPMs. So if you take the guard off and put a 4-inch wheel on a 3-inch tool, now you're in an overspeed situation, and 9 times out of 10, usually something goes wrong, or if somebody calls us and says, hey, I had a wheel come apart on me, first question we ask is, was the guard on? They say no, then we're going to need to know speed ratings, because believe it or not, the bigger the wheel, the slower it spins, or slower it's rated. So cutoff wheels in general are rated, at least 3-inch wheels are rated for 20,000 RPMs, and that's pretty common throughout the industry. And I'd say 80% of the market is a 1/16 thickness, but there are some 1/32 out there. We do carry a 3/32 thickness wheel, but it's not a cutoff wheel. It's actually for grinding spot welds, especially if we're taking panels off. Okay, so that's why this illustration shows you that we want to keep the guard on, we want to use the tool properly, and we want to watch our speeds. 20,000 RPMs is what most of them are rated for, and like I said, we went over the thicknesses. If you're curious, there are some demos that are available on our website showing a number of different products, but I'm not here to sell you our products. I'm here to hopefully get you some ICAR credits and educate you on body panel refinishing. So we do have some demos and best practices on our website, but the point that I'm really trying to drive home here is be careful with cutoff wheels, especially the speeds that they're rated at, and we really want to guard on the tool. Best practices also, the operator should have gloves on, maybe a face shield, or at least safety glasses at a minimum. because our eyes are not replaceable and hate to see anything happen to anybody. When it comes to scuffing, there's a couple of different opportunities or ways you can do so. The illustration up in the upper right-hand corner, that's a picture right out of our catalog, and not sure if you know this, but most maroon pads are in the 320 to 400 grit range. That's doing obviously all of our primer and pre-base coat work. And so you see a lot of maroon pads on the body side of collision centers or shops. And then of course the gray pad, we seem to see that quite a bit on the paint side. And as you can kind of imagine, it's around 800 to 1,000, so that's doing quite a bit of blend work. And there's even some gold pads out there with some of the finer metallics. And I was just at NACE last week, some of these crazy thermal colors and these paints that can change color electronically. Pretty wild stuff that's coming out, and I'm sure it'll be all over SEMA later this year. The gold pads are 1,000 grit and finer, and it's when we require a really, really fine scratch for a pearl or a fine metallic, but obviously not as common as a gray or a maroon pad. So as you can see here in the bullets, the maroon pad is a heavy-duty pad. It's mostly doing work right up to the primer stage, or maybe even through the primer stage, depending on the paint manufacturer, where the gray pad's doing our prep work or doing our blends. There are some sponges out there if somebody's looking for something about the same size as a scuff pad, but they're looking for an exact grit. The illustration in the lower right-hand corner, that's what we call rotolo foam for waterborne shops, where God forbid they have to denib some of their base coat work, waterborne work. Obviously we can't wet sand that because that's just going to make paint even runnier. So this is an exact grit on a sponge sanded pad, about the same size as a scuff pad. Those can come anywhere from 180 grit all the way to 1,000 grit. In the upper right-hand corner, those sponges can be used either wet or dry, as it's indicated in the bullet point. If you ever notice, you'll see two different grits on the back of them, especially ours. The coarser grit of the two is what the sponge sands when it's dry. The finer grit of the two is what the sponge sands when it's wet. So depending on what you're doing, we usually recommend the wet or dry sponges in solvent shops, and we usually recommend the rolls of the rotoroll foam in a waterborne shop because they're looking for an exact grit to do whatever they need to do in terms of sanding. We talked about the gold pads with metallics. Believe it or not, there's some white pads out there. They don't have any abrasive grain in them at all. They're great for cleaning up any overspray where you don't want to scratch the surface. Or we've even seen people use them to clean their longboard when they're doing some body filler work. There are some scuff gels out there. Obviously, don't want you to deviate from any of your paint manufacturer's recommendations, but there are some automotive aftermarket products out there, and we carry one also. I just want to make sure you understand the advantage of a scuff gel. The advantage of a scuff gel is it cleans and abrades at the same time. I've been in a number of shops where you might see somebody finishing a bumper and they think they're all done, so they scuff it, they clean it, and 9 times out of 10 they got to scuff it again. Well, instead of doing it 3 times, if they did it once with a scuff gel, they would clean and abrade at the same time, and they'd get a more consistent scratch that our friends at the paint company love to adhere paint to. So the advantage of a scuff gel, as I just mentioned, cleans and abrades at the same time, but it also helps us with our blends, and we talked about the rotolo foam pads that are in the lower right-hand corner. One thing that we didn't talk about is the cookies, hamburger patties, whatever you want to, we hear their names in the various industries. So there's a couple different grits. The kind of red colored pad next to the Norton logo there to the left, that's typically around 80 grit. That's great for removing some rust or oxidation, dressing up a weld. It's not really going to remove any metal. The orange and blue disc to the picture to the right, those are what we call tweeners. We call them rapid blend or vortex products. Believe it or not, the orange one will cut like 80, but it'll finish like 180. And the blue one will cut like 180 and finish like 320. It's kind of the future of where surface conditioning discs are going. They're thick, they can be used on edge, they can be used flat, they can even be used on the top surface. if you put a 3-inch on a 2-inch backup pad or anything like that. The thick ones that you see in between the sponges pictures, those are what we call rapid strip discs. These are phenomenal for taking seam sealer off before we move a door skin, or if we're just trying to, resurface or change up the seam sealer because it got damaged in a collision and we need to fix that particular area. These are phenomenal for removing rust, paint, oxidation, anywhere where we want to leave the base metal behind. As a matter of fact, the thick orange ones that you see there with the mandrel, those finish like 36 grit. So believe it or not, you can take scuff pad type material, we call it Vertex in our world, and you can go from 36 grit all the way to 1,000 grit depending on the color and the finish that you're trying to achieve, either by hand or in a rotary fashion. We even make scuff pads now in 6-inch forms that you can put on a DA and do blends in both maroon and gray, put scuff gel on it, just trying to make your life a whole lot easier and make refinishing a whole lot easier. So there's a couple of different scuffing techniques that are available out there depending on what you're trying to do. Any questions, comments at this point before I show you the exam and the credits, how you get your credits?
I'm not seeing any questions.
Okay. So now let's talk about the test. Let me show you the test. I'll pull that up. So it's a simple 10-question multiple choice test with a lot of things that we talked about in the presentation. So if anybody's interested, obviously if you could fill out either with your ICAR ID or your last 4 digits of the Social Security number. I don't want that, ICAR does. They want to make sure that you are who you are. And if you could fill out the name, address, state, zip code, and all that wonderful stuff, that information gets passed on to ICAR if you would like to receive credit for the 1-hour course. How you go about getting your credits, this actually, here we go. This actual application is on ICAR's website, and it's also on ours. So the same information they're looking for on the test, if you decide to do so, you can send me the test. And of course, they're looking for all the wonderful things that you've hopefully already provided me on the test. And they want to know what industry segment you're from. And this is where, I guess, the rubber meets the road. This is where they want their money for processing your credit. So as you can see here, up to an 8-hour class, they want $47. If it's an 8-hour class or longer, they want $93. We are listed under St. Gobain, but a couple things I want to mention to you that they don't, for some reason, I guess we're not the only ones that send them ICAR credits, but they want this application to be sent 45 days from today. So you can send me the test whenever you want, and Melissa will give you my contact information, or you can file after the facts. But they're asking for 45 days because other people send their information to ICAR to get credits. But we're listed here under our parent company, and the class that we just did today is body panel refinishing. It's number 2. We've done a couple of our other 1-hour classes with Impact, and of course we'd love to do more. But the class we did today is this one right here, body panel refinishing, for class number 2. So they want you to check that off. And as I mentioned, this is on their website, and it's also on our Norton Automotive website. And you can see here there's 12 other classes that we offer, but that's the one that we did today. And appreciate your time, appreciate your patience, and if there's anything you need, Melissa or I can help you.
Okay, does anybody have any questions? I don't see anything yet. If not, what we'll do is, again, I'll send a presentation with the test and all the information you need. And if you have questions, you can follow up with Craig. He'll be happy to answer them. And we'd also like, if you guys could give us a little bit of time and give us any suggestions on future webinars, and we will try and make them available for you. So in the email, if you could send that back to me, that would be wonderful. And I still don't see questions, so I think that concludes the webinar, and we'll be in touch with future training opportunities. Thank you, everybody. We appreciate being on the webinar. Thanks, Craig.
Thank you.
Bye, everyone.